Welcome to Questions We're Afraid to Ask.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It has been a little while, and so we're just going to kind of talk about what's going on. I figured we'll start with, the election was crazy, and then it wasn't. The lead up to the election was crazy, and then it just, happened, and then it was sort of over. And...
Yeah. The other part of that is the media pushed an idea and a storyline, the corporate media. And you and I, the whole time, just were like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like what the people we're talking to are like. It's like, this doesn't look like what's happening on X or Twitter, or not that that's,
it felt like a narrative.
But it felt like a narrative. And then it's like, well, looks like y'all were just completely effing wrong, like you have been for a while. Oh, look, the bulk of the country voted for not Harris.
Well, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was the bulk
by county. By county.
By
when
county,
you look at the map.
yes.
But
it was only 51 something.
Dude won the popular vote.
No,
and that hasn't happened in forever. So
for sure.
And then just not only that, it's how much of each demographic he won better than he did the last time.
Right. Yeah. No, right? There was definitely an improvement. I think there was an improvement over the first time he won. It wasn't.
There was, and an improvement over the second time, which was better than the first time.
Right.
And some of them were drastic improvements.
He's only improved in his numbers, which really does call into question the 2020 election results, and I really do think it's mostly skewed by the mail-in voting.
And we're not going to litigate that here, but
no,
it's done. It's too late.
You're looking something up.
Yeah.
No, there's definitely something to be said for.
Well, I think there was only one demographic he did not improve in.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for when people snap out of the narrative that they're being told, there's a visceral response to that of and I think it, there were people getting unlocked the whole way through. You have something and you go, hang on, wait, they're lying about that. Well, what else are they lying? Oh, I see how they're misconstruing things. And then I think a lot of people got woken up after the debate of hang on a minute, I thought he was competent, and then suddenly the media narrative flipped to that
was a huge loss. It's, wait a minute, you've been telling us he was the sharpest person, so you were lying about that. What else have you been lying about?
Right.
And it was public. It was just everywhere.
The follow-up question is, okay, you were lying to that. And my first question, I think your first question too, was okay, well then who's in charge? I already know you guys are liars. It's not news.
So who's
to me.
Actually running the government?
Right. And I think that I think it was a Fox cartoon that was the best, that it was presidential portraits.
Yeah,
and when it got to Biden's, it just said the White House staff.
And
it was everybody except
everybody.
him.
Yeah. It was the Fox political cartoons section, which they have some of the best ones right now. Whether you like Fox or not, their political cartoons are great.
That and the humor out of the Babylon Bee is quite spectacular right now as well.
Even one of the best headlines was Babylon Bee headline from 3 months ago, actual headline today. It was just
that. They've been doing that a lot. I mean, it's happened quite a few times.
Yeah, it keeps happening. They're like, we thought it was a joke.
But, and it's sort of it's that thing of when I continue to prove that the conspiracy theories aren't actually conspiracies, at what point am I are you just hiding the truth here? Because they keep coming true.
Or people are what's a conspiracy theory? Just something you figured out 6 months before everybody else did.
Right.
Right. Which on a note of on a completely separate note, I do want to call out a couple of awesome things you got for your backdrop. You have that awesome Robin light up box, which is really cool right there. And then you can see that it says on air.
I need to fix the lights on it. It's up there. It's an on air sign.
And it's got, me and you and the name of the podcast on it, which is super cool. Talk about getting super nerdy. Much better than my background of my unpainted and painted miniatures and my paints and stuff. So, and my random doors that lead to, a closet. You have a much better. Isn't yours a closet that you took the doors off of though?
Yeah, this is a closet. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it used to be my desk. That's what the bookshelf is.
That makes sense. But weird. So we had the election. We got all that. We still don't know jack crap about the first assassin.
Or
we know
the
a little
second,
bit. We know a little bit more about the second one. Then we had.
I don't want to call the Cybertruck explosion a third attempt, but it was at a truck
I was going to say there was a strange set of circumstances around someone who died, and it looks like they may have killed themselves. We don't know for sure, in a Cybertruck, which was one of the best advertisements I've ever seen for a Cybertruck. They set off a bomb in it, and it just blew it all up and not out. Then there was the crazy guy who ran over a whole bunch of people, and there were IEDs in New Orleans, and that craziness. And then in all this other stuff, we had like 5 weeks of crazy drone stuff over the Northeast, and then drones all over the country.
Going on.
And but it felt like overnight it just went away, like right around Christmas time. And I think you had a good point when you had said, I think people got like busy or sidetracked or and stopped posting, or it's just happening constantly. So they stopped posting it.
I think a couple things. I think one, people got tired of it, just in general. I think there's only so long you can hold on to a mystery like that. Some people they just have to let that go. Like, well, I'm not gonna know, so
they're not getting answers. So
right.
Well, you can only look so long. You're right. You can only look so long at the thing where you're like, you're not gonna tell me. You're really not gonna. Okay, I all right. You got to move on with life.
Right. I also think that there was, I'm sure that when Christmas hit, people got distracted.
There's travel, there's Christmas, there's holidays and stuff.
Stopped looking and getting confused by things that weren't drones. I think there was a lot of, War of the Worlds panic kind of thing where people were freaking out about every little tiny thing in the sky as well.
They also shut down private drone use in a lot of those areas, which may have cut down on some of the stuff that was feeding into the other stuff.
Well, and to tie that, let's talk about it. The Cybertruck. Now, I've seen counters to this argument. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but there was it was on the Sean Ryan podcast.
The email sent. Yeah.
The email that came out, like some guy got it, and there's speculation that he's made stuff up before and that this might not be true. And
to be fair to that guy, he's like, I got this weird email and I'm just going to read it to you. And
right.
He didn't endorse it. He was just like, I just got this, and
he got it before the event. In the email, he mentions the fact that he's got explosive devices. I did see that the big debunk was he said that he owned this car and he didn't own this car. So but what he does is he calls out specifically in there that the drones that we're seeing are Chinese drones, that they're using
anti-gravitic technology.
No, he doesn't even. It just says gravitic propulsion
or gravitic. Gravitic propulsion,
which was the one thing that stuck out to me of like, man, that's a weird way to put it. That sounds like an official term rather than just like saying anti-gravity, because that's what nobody's really saying, gravitic propulsion. And they were on the podcast, they mentioned that they looked it up and it was mostly just like science fiction stuff. Like there wasn't really but he was saying that the drones we're seeing over Jersey, in this email was saying that the drones we're seeing over New Jersey are China's, that historically that they've only been the US's, but that China has cracked the problem or whatever, and that this is potentially a show of force.
Yeah, and I think you said like we have it and China has it, and it's kind of like
yeah. Well, and let's loop this all back in. If Ashton's right, and I think he is, that the Malaysian airplane that disappeared was using this same sort of technology to do whatever that was they did, and there's evidence that China saw it and that China was even trying to get those guys on the plane that were, I can't remember, the semiconductor company, like this, that it could all be tied together, and that they actually did finally crack it, and they're going, hey, now we've got them.
Yeah, and with other crazy things, I was watching Peter Zian's thing today, and he was talking about a bunch of stuff that happened, and he's posting like a week late because he wants you to pay for his Patreon thing to get it immediate, which is fine. Okay, cool. Everybody needs to make a buck. But he was talking about how I think I talked to you about this last week, that the Nordic countries were going to start inspecting the Russian shadow fleet and see if they pass inspection and all that. Yeah, they seized one of the ships. They're like, nope, you're ours now, and have pulled it off. And he's talking about, so we've got that going on. And then on top of that, apparently the nuclear icebreaker that Russia was building, because to use their northern ports, they have to have all those icebreakers.
Right.
They can't get the components anymore. And so it's basically been postponed indefinitely. So now their northern ports are going to be sealed. The Black Sea is done. They can't get out of Turkey because of the treaty into the Red Sea and those straits. And he's just like, so we're going to see what happens when, the U.S. doesn't protect global shipping anymore. He's like, that's been guaranteed since.
Yeah.
Well, he said right now it looks like we're not inclined to. We don't want to waste the money. We don't want to do it, but we've been doing it since 1950. And so what happens? We're in a globalist world where you have to ship food and fuel and parts and this and supply chains. He's like, what do you do when you can't protect your stuff and there's no cop on the block? It's just going to be, he's just like, he didn't have an answer. He's just like, things are going to get weird.
Pirates, man. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now. There's just a ton. And then, Trump slapped Trudeau around at Mar-a-Lago with some tariffs. And from my understanding, somebody much smarter than Trudeau in the Canadian government, they had a personality fight and he asked her to leave. And now he's basically lost all his power and he's out as of today. So that's, and Trump wants to buy Greenland and Canada and turn them into 51 and 52 states. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, that's I don't even know how to deal with that. Like
I don't know.
Like it's just that's never going to. I mean, the China, so the Canada thing's never going to happen.
That was never going to happen.
Thing could.
And it's sent Greenland into a tailspin because they're like, well, no, actually, we want our independence. We've wanted it for a long time, and please don't sell us. Don't so because I didn't realize this, but Greenland's owned by somebody else. I think it's Denmark that owns Greenland.
Oh, interesting.
They're like a territory, which leads into something that happened during the roll call when they were getting ready to certify all the votes, where the Democratic congressperson got up and was like, why didn't you call Guam and Puerto Rico and all the other ones? And the guy lectured her, and they both had good points, right? He's like, we don't call them because they don't get a vote because they're not a state. And then she started to go on her rant, and they cut her mic off. I understand why they cut her mic off, but she has a legitimate point. It's time to fish or cut bait on these territories. Make them a state or let them go, right?
Yeah.
Because, and the way I look at it is, okay, so you can live there. The taxes are kind of weird. You're an American citizen with American protections, but you don't get all your constitutional protections because they are able to ban firearms, which is a blatant,
right.
just blanket ban. You can't own them, which violates the Second Amendment. But because they're not a state and they're a territory, there's different rules. So we've got to it doesn't make sense. Make them states or cut them loose.
Well, I mean, the first question is, do they even want to be states?
Well, yeah. Or do they want to be independent?
Yeah. I mean, my expectation would be...
Then there's the ones we just won't let go no matter what, which is basically Guam, because for us, Guam is a giant aircraft carrier you can't sink in the Pacific. And it's so strategically placed that we will just never let it go. I was watching a podcast. I was watching the Unsubscribed podcast, and they had a guy on there who's an anti-aircraft missile specialist. I can't remember his name, but he was saying that right now, the best air defenses in the world are on Guam because the U.S. is worried China might pull something. So it is the most heavily defended area anywhere in the world.
That makes sense.
Which is just but it didn't used to be.
Right.
It used to be places like Russia or Jerusalem or, even Baghdad back in the day. So, but it's just like you're watching all these pieces move at the same time. And then while all this stuff's going on, Biden is giving a giant middle finger to everybody on the way out, screwing over Democrats and trying to screw over Trump before he's even in office. But since he won the election, Trump has succeeded in more, it feels like, has been more successful as a president before he's gotten into office than Biden has in 4 years.
I mean, there definitely feels like there is
a momentum
like
shift.
Something's actually happening.
Yeah, like a momentum shift. And the big thing is like bullying Trudeau and causing a shakeup there. I don't know if that was the goal or not, but he threatened the Mexican president with massive tariffs. And then instantly now the Mexicans are starting to stop people trying to come across the border. And then we're having to deal with all that stuff, like what feels like the escalation of violent crime from illegal immigrants. And I'm going to say it that way because they committed a crime by coming into the U.S., not following our immigration laws. So that makes them illegals, not undocumented migrants. They committed a crime. Yes, we need to make the process easier and better. But no, you don't get to just waltz across the border. Try it in any other country. They'll throw you in jail.
Yeah.
Some of them, they might shoot you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and I sort of, and maybe I'm misinterpreting what my understanding of the plan is, like from the Trump team standpoint, because what my understanding of the plan is, like, we're going to start at the top of the list with like violent criminals and people who essay and all that kind of stuff. Like we start there, get rid of the people.
Let's start with child rapists, right? And then work and murderers, and then work our way down. Which I have absolutely no problem with. In fact, with the child rapist thing, well, maybe we shouldn't bother deporting them. Maybe we should just execute them, because I am a pro death penalty on some things kind of guy. It's just, and then there's England posting that they want to extradite people like me for saying that. If I say, well, maybe England's got a problem over there with their stuff,
which they clearly do.
Which, and my response to that is, well, okay, just choke on my First Amendment,
right?
Because I don't live there. I live here, and go away.
Yeah,
you're already owing to, right? Don't.
Well, how are you gonna hold me accountable to a law in a country that I don't? That's how China gets away with copyright infringement stuff that happens all the time. Like, how are you supposed to enforce your libel law in a country that doesn't have that law? Like,
and the absurdity of it here is, okay, so we're going to hire a lawyer to file extradition requests for something that is legally protected in this country.
Yeah, we would never extradite for that.
Now, this also means I've canceled any plans I ever had of ever traveling to England. There were things I wanted to see there. Not no more.
Well, until they take care of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if they keep going the way they are, I'll never bother.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean,
here's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for places like Games Workshop, which is one of the reasons I want to go. Their big headquarters is in
to leave.
Sherwood, to move here. When we start seeing major traditionally British companies relocate either to Australia or to mainland Europe or to here in the US, I mean, that's that I think at that point England is unsalvageable.
Well, it would be like California's going through, where major corporations are leaving California because of
everything that's going on.
A bunch of different reasons that we don't need to get into. But like, so yeah, I mean, there definitely is something to be said there.
And the great part, I talked to you about this earlier, the indigenous British are not happy, and people are upset that people are using the term indigenous for the people who are native to Britain. Indigenous means native to, right?
Right. No, it only means native to when that person is not white.
Yeah, I know. And Yeah.
That's. But that, I mean, that's because you really, you like who would be the indigenous Britons other than the Britons?
The descendants of the Celts and the Norse.
Yeah.
Britain has been, how far back do you have to go to label that? How many generations back? Right. So that's a legitimate question. If we want to tie that to it, because I'm an indigenous American, at least in part, because I can trace my lineage back to Native American tribes.
Well, I mean,
but I'm also a multi-generation American, right?
Well, the Doty name goes back to the Mayflower. How am I not? I mean, how am I not indigenous at that point?
You no longer have any cultural or familial ties in any way, shape, or form to the people who came over. Right? Your entire identity is as an American.
Right.
Back multiple generations. So you're an indigenous American at that point, right? We're not calling you a Native American. We're not doing tribal appropriation here.
Right.
But at what point do you become indigenous? That's the question, right?
Right. How many generations does it take? And I'm sure I've done a lot
How
of
many
my
licks
genealogy.
does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Roll Pop? That's the question.
Never know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of my genealogy, and a lot of my family, at least a significant portion of what I've traced, they've all been here a long time. I think I have to go back 3 or 4 generations to hit, excluding my grandmother because she's adopted and I just don't know.
Well, you just can't do that. Yeah.
Other than that, nobody was an immigrant for at least, my whole family's been here at least 4 or 5 generations. And then some lines I can go back 13
longer,
and it's still
well, on one side of my family, I can also trace it back to the Mayflower, right? To Plymouth Rock. And another side is through to Native Americans. Others are to German immigrants from the 18s, before Texas left Mexico, and before it was its own state, our own country in its own state. And then, it's just multiple generations back on both sides of my family, as far back as we've gone. And which is why when people are like, what are you? I'm like, I'm a Texan, right? That is my cultural identity. I'm from Texas. What country are you from? Right. That was
well. And the funny thing is that Texas, I saw a map that was saying imagine you lived in Texas and there was a war going on
in Michigan,
and it was, sent that to you. Yeah. And I sort of looked at that and I was like, man, Texas is bigger than most European countries, most 2 put together. And I
actually,
was
it's massive.
But it was sort of that thing of that sort of the joke of what country are you from? I'm from Texas. We happen to live in a gigantic country, but I'm sure just like in India, all the different places are essentially their own place. And so, you really are, your culture really is almost your state rather than your
region. I was going to say your region. Yeah.
I think Americans have sort of that.
I looked it up.
Hang on one second.
Go ahead.
Americans sort of have that distinction of where, if you live in Germany, you're German. You're not German and then also European. You're just German. But Americans, I'm Texan and I'm an American. We almost have 2 different cultural identities where most people in countries probably don't. What were you going to say? Sorry.
So I was looking it up. So you can fit 15 Texases inside of mainland Europe. But Texas, you can fit at least 10 of the largest European countries inside the border of Texas.
Wow, that's more than I thought.
Including Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and all of Eastern Europe, the Soviet bloc. Eastern, it's just and England. It's just
England is so small when you realize how powerful they were globally at one point. When you realize how small that landmass is, it's quite significant. I was reading a book once called I forget what it's called. It's by the guy who did XKCD, the comics, but it was like
Yeah.
wild questions. It was, one of them's like, if a baseball was thrown from a pitcher to a baseball at the speed of light, what would happen? And it's just utter destruction. But one of the I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, one of the questions, well, what would happen if everyone in the world got into one spot and then jumped at the same time? What would happen? And the funny part is he goes, nothing. The real problem would be getting everybody home. Because he basically said, like, you could put everyone on the planet would basically fit inside Rhode Island. And so he goes on the hypothetical of, if you magically transported everybody to Rhode Island, the disaster it would be to try to get everybody home. Would just be, yeah.
So I wanted to give for those who've never been to Texas, a couple of things, because I sometimes I talk to people who don't want to drive an hour away, right? They don't want to drive 2 hours away. To drive east to west across Texas is 14? 773 miles.
14 hours or something?
So driving 75 miles per hour, because we use freedom units here, because we're the only country that's made it to the moon, or at least landed people on it, it's 10 hours and 44 minutes. But to go
north to south,
75
far.
miles an hour is 801, which is 11 hours. But to go from Brownsville, the furthest south, to the furthest north tip can take 16 hours and is 896 miles. It's like, we have 533,000 miles of paved roadway.
It's a lot
in the state. And
it's a lot.
And for those who've never been to like North or West Texas, there's a lot of land with no roads, like no road at all.
Did you know that Grayson pulled this one on me? My oldest pulled this on me the other day. He goes, Texas we have the fastest road in the world. And I went, well, we don't. That's the Autobahn in Germany. Yeah. But like, let me Google this. And I'm like, well, you're not. There's one in Abu Dhabi where you can drive 99 miles an hour.
Well, I also thought there was one across like Wyoming where there's just no speed limit. It's
that may be true, because I was asking about posted speed limits, but the toll road in Austin is the fastest road in America, because you can go 85.
Yeah.
So on that 130 toll road,
the 130 toll road is 85 miles an hour. Yeah. Oh, I know. I've
done.
I have been doing 85 and been passed like I was standing still.
Yeah.
Because people think they're on the Formula One track.
I did that on 80. I did that coming back. I would think I was probably doing 90, but we were driving back from the airport after having come back from Europe, and I was like almost falling asleep on the road, driving back, just going like, please don't let there be a deer. Actually, it probably would have been a hog, but somebody did that. There was some minivan and just hit a hog, and
it just disintegrates at that speed.
And it was bad for everybody. Yeah.
So not to be on the complete Texas hype, but I knew it was big. I looked up, if Texas was a country, where would it rank in the world as far as economy?
Well, it's pretty high up there.
8th.
Yeah.
We're the 8th largest economy in the world if we were a country, which is just nuts. And the point of that is like we were saying, the U.S. is a regionally different place, right? There is no such thing as an American. You got people from California, and they're very different than people from Texas. And then you have the Deep South, which is very different from the Northeast. And then you have the Southeast, which is different even than the Deep South. Then you have the Midwest, which gets really weird. Then you have the Northwest, which is kind of your classic cowboy. You're either a cowboy or you're a Mormon, right? Depending on which state you live in up there. And everybody thinks the Mormons are all in one state. They're not. They're actually spread out around that area. So it's just like, we've got tons of different dialects. We've got all this different stuff, and it's spread out. That's the difference. Because I know, like England, there's a bunch of different dialects there, but it's all crammed together. Tiny.
Yeah.
Close.
Well, a lot of the dialects that we have here are because different groups from England came and settled in different places. And then Germany, and then you get
well, specifically in Texas, because we had a huge German influx because there was no room for them in New York. So in like the 1830s, when that German
came in through Hispaniola,
they were being migrated over. They got to New York and they got sent down around the Gulf, and which is why like you hit the middle of Texas and all of a sudden everything's named in a German name, right? You got New Braunfels, you got Shiner, you got Fredericksburg, you got this burg, that burg, whatever burg. And, you know, I like my great grandfather spoke German, you know, and his dad spoke German. They spoke English too, but like it was a thing. And
that's on my wife's side. They've got their family all came in through Germany, and
that's why you do the Worst Fest every
Texas,
year.
and they're all from this part of you know.
Yeah, that's why they're Lutheran, right?
Yeah,
I mean, seriously, that's where that comes from. So it's wild to kind of dig into all that stuff and look at it and see how it, because it changes culturally. Like, you know, I'm running into people who are like, and this is now going to get into a generational thing. You try to be polite the way you were raised, and people are getting offended by it. It's like, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, thank you. Let me hold the door open for you. And it's like, you chauvinist pig. It's like, I'm sorry, this is polite. I don't really want to hold the door open for you, especially right now. It's cold. Will you please just shut up and walk inside? I don't need to thank you. I don't even need a freaking acknowledgement, right? It's just the way I was raised. That doesn't mean I'm a chauvinist pig.
Well, and that's,
I mean, I might be a chauvinist pig, but it's for other reasons, not because I'm holding the door open for you.
Well, and that's, and I think the difference is honestly, I think it's because we're getting more of the cross-pollination of different, you know, because, you know, when I go to the corner store, the dude in front of me is holding the door for me, and then I'm holding the door for the, you know, you don't hold it up, but you hold it so the guy can grab it and come through. I mean, like, that's just what you do. And there are some people in that typically it's when someone comes in from somewhere else, or you know, has this external idea introduced to them of like, well, holding a door for you is somehow making you less than because they don't think you, you know, and you're just like, well, hang on a minute, like, I talk about this, like, don't assume the reason that the thing I'm doing, the thing I'm saying, the reason I'm doing, don't assume the worst intent from me.
Like, it feels like that is happening with not all, but a lot of the people who are younger than me. Now, the interesting thing is with like my kid and your oldest kid, I'm starting to see blowback on that. Now, I don't have a female perspective from this. Like, you have a daughter, but I've just got boys. And the guys are like, no, we want to be, it's more of a treat women the way we did in the 50s and all the good ways we treated women in the 50s, you know, kind of a way, right? Be polite to them, be nice to them, you know, open doors for them, compliment the way they look. And you don't mean anything bad by it. It's like, no, I don't mean you can't do any of this other stuff. It's just, you know, and they're also, a lot of them are really conservative, even though I'm not like programming my kid to be conservative. Both of my boys are kind of leaning conservative. It was really interesting because my 10-year-old, I told you this earlier, we were listening to the latest episode of the Y-Files, and he was talking about how so many Germans got snuck into our country and other countries and hidden and protected with all the evil things they did as Nazis. And he was like, that's evil. That's wrong. Those people probably shouldn't be alive. They shouldn't have gone free. They should have been killed. And I was just like, well, you know, there is real evil in the world. And, you know, he hears just broad stroke descriptions of what they did. And he's like, that's evil. They shouldn't be allowed to continue living. And I'm like, you know, there is evil in the world, and not everything is on a sliding scale. And there are things that is just like, no, that's wrong. Just period wrong. And, or I should say capital B wrong, the way I say capital T true for like religious stuff. You know, you assault a small child, you starve children to death, you use them for experiments against their will. Yeah, that's evil. That's real evil.
Right.
So
yeah.
I know we're all over the place tonight, but there's just been a
You were
lot
just saying
happening.
something, and I lost where I was going. Something before.
Was it about like the younger generation kind of blowing back against the?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
The sort of the thing that I'm seeing, and I watch some of those, red pill
Yeah.
podcasts and the whatever
Which is
podcasts
funny.
and stuff
You
like
figured
that.
out why. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I sort of realized that I think, I sometimes I'm very flighty. Things grab my attention and I get them. And I think part of what that was is I needed a perspective on dating in this modern time. One, because my son's about to be at that point,
Be
but
at
also
that
because
age.
I know
Yeah.
you are, and like you're out there sort of in the modern dating world, and
God, which sucks.
yeah. And so I think that was part of me needing like another perspective on that, and sort of what I'm seeing, and it's sort of how I interpret it, is that there's these two competing ideas between what is traditional marriage and what this idea, this sort of feminist idea of what modern women are. And and I'm going to broadly generalize, and I'm not, it's sort of, this is sort of what I'm picking up, is sort of this idea of like, well, I should be able to do whatever I want to do with my body, and there should be no consequences. And the response that I'm hearing from the men is, well, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but it doesn't change the fact that now I'm not attracted to you anymore. And what we're trying to
It's
communicate to you is this is what we're looking for. If
yeah.
you want to get someone like me, this is what I expect. And the response I'm sort of hearing, sort of what it sounds like, is like, well, that's not fair. We want to be able to do whatever we want and not have to deal with the consequence. And it's like, well, this is what I want, and if you're not, then you're not right for me. And I think we're seeing that get not worse, but it's the OnlyFans thing, where now it's
Yeah.
like people are, then go on Twitter, go on Instagram, like you can't avoid it. Like it's just, people just showing whatever, just trying, it's just
To
this
try and make a
call
buck.
for
Yeah.
attention. Well, I think there's a make it
Well,
buck, and it's
that's part
also
of it.
that we've become addicted to the
Well, all the
attention.
people who just videoed themselves screaming when Trump won.
Yeah, what is that?
It's like that. You are having what would be a temper tantrum for a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, if you cannot, and so I'm going to talk like if I'm a prospective employer. Hold on,
it's 100% performative.
But so it's like freedom of speech. You can say and do whatever you want, but there are consequences to any action you take. There are consequences for every word I say, everything I do. If I decide to go left or I decide to go right, there are consequences for that action. And I look at something like that, and if I were to see someone having screamed and throw a temper tantrum on the internet, and if I had happened to be a prospective employer down the line, and that person sits in front of me, and I go, "Oh, I saw you have your temper tantrum," I wouldn't hire them.
Yeah, no,
I just wouldn't hire them. Because, well, I tend to work through the bulk of my career, through most of the places I've worked, and everything has been some customer service aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
From the job I have now, to even when I was a pastor, to when I worked at Blockbuster, to when I worked at Pizza Hut, to, all the jobs, they've all been customer service oriented. And so at the end of the day, you've got to be able to bite your tongue and put up with the customer and at least smile or be neutral to the customer, not lose it. Now, does that mean I don't think you ought to be able to go and complain in private off on your own? If, say Trump wins and you want to scream your head off because you need to let the stress out, okay. But why are we advertising it to the world?
Right.
That's what I don't understand.
There's a difference between doing something like this or even doing a short video. You're like, here's why I'm really upset about this. Great. But what you're doing, again, it goes back to it's performative. It's because you stopped and you turned on the camera. So at that point, it's not like someone saw it happen. It's not like someone was recording in the room when the announcement came out and you had this reaction. That's different.
That's different. Yeah, absolutely. Because I'll give you a different example of that. The people who set up to film their friends and family when the climax of season 2 of The Mandalorian happened and the Luke thing happened and people just lost their shit.
Right.
I get that. In the moment, like if you're watching election night and somebody's filming you and you lose it, that is different than,
right.
okay, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to set up my camera. I'm going to get my lighting right, get all right. And now I'm just going to go.
Right. Because you're acting. You are putting on a, it's performative.
I guess I'm just not an actor. I've never had an inclination for it. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me.
But I don't even think I don't mean performative in the idea of acting. I mean, technically what we're doing right now is performative. We are putting this on and we're, having a conversation and we're doing it on purpose. So it becomes performative at that point. And I don't mean that to negate Rogan's performative. It's all,
it's all for, anything for public consumption is performative.
Performative. Okay. And so there's a difference between so once you agree to that, then you have to go, everything that you're doing at that point, once you know the camera is on, is deliberate. So you are deliberately freaking the fuck out.
Is it just for the clicks? I guess
I think so.
Maybe. Yeah.
And so that goes back to my original thing of what's happening is that we've shifted the attention point. Because it used, so, you think about, let's just take the prettiest girl in school when we were growing up. She was just the prettiest girl in school. And she got all the attention from the boys around her, and that was it. But now the prettiest girl in school is now also competing with the prettiest girl in every other school. And they're continually, and because now they're competing for the attention of the boys in every school, because all they want is that like button to go up. There's this escalating thing where now you've got young girls who are too young to be doing it, dancing around in their bathing suits and stuff on TikTok and Instagram. I mean, like,
and now that I think about it, I did stupid shit for Cheers when I was young. It was different stupid shit, but because it was Gen X stupid shit. So it was usually some like tetanus infested rusty nail ramp we built off the driveway over a ditch, and we were driving our bikes off of it and being like, all right, I'm gonna fly like Superman off my bike, no pads, no helmets, no nothing, bam, into the ground.
Well, and how many kids jump off the roof of the garage into the swimming pool because there's a party and crowd
cannonball off the roof, man.
It's mob mentality. And what's happened is what we've gone to a mob mentality all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody's reacting to the mob constantly because the mob is sitting in your pocket, dinging and vibrating at you to remind you that the mob is paying attention.
Yeah, sometimes I think the smartphone was one of the best and worst inventions in the world.
It's
right?
Every new technology is Pandora's box.
Yeah, it's everything is disruptive to society and culture. Everything is. You're right. You're absolutely right.
My father-in-law just got a book for Christmas about Gutenberg, and I was like, "Ooh, when you're done with that, I want it," because it was about
the printing press was
how disruptive it was at the time. Yeah,
it broke the church.
Right.
It broke one of the oldest, most powerful political entities in the world because Luther could print his ideas in mass in the language of the people.
Right.
Let's take a step through the Gutenberg press and Luther's Bible codified German as a language.
Right.
That's huge when you stop and think about it.
But then hang on. But then if you look at some of the next most disruptive technologies, and I can't really think of it. I mean, Industrial Revolution was a big one, but then it's like, I was going to say radio and then television. But
the phone line, the phone,
right,
the telegraph.
But those were all. What's interesting about those is as those came out, they were really heavily regulated, and because they were so hardware dependent, the escalation of technology was slow slower than it is now. And I think the difference is with the regulation of the internet, they didn't regulate early, which is good. I'm not saying that's a good thing. And because of that, it ran off with itself. And
we had access to all information, so we don't want to give up any information now.
Right. And then on top of that, it's because it just became, it went from being a physical problem, running lines and all that kind of stuff, to a math problem where it's like, who can write the best code? And it became very dispersed at that point.
The other part of that is, in the beginning, yes, the internet was wild, wild west, but computers were cost prohibitive. People had a computer for the family or at work. And now we have supercomputers in our pocket you can get for like $99, or less.
You can get an Android pretty cheap.
Yeah. Even used iPhones. Like you go sign up for a plan for an iPhone. I mean, how many times you see sign up now, no money down, it's like
free phone. You couple generations old, but it's still a supercomputer.
Well, this one, I have this as a collectible. The original iPhone was a supercomputer, with the way that you and I grew up defining what a supercomputer could do. I mean, this was massive technology when I was a kid.
Right.
The graphic.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but the TI-85, like the basic graphic calculator that most kids get in high school, had more computing power than the Apollo lander.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, they were running most of the Apollo missions with slide rules.
Yeah.
That's this, I believe, which is not even a TI-85. This is nowhere near as powerful, has more computing power than the entire Apollo.
I don't know if I've actually.
Yeah, this is it doesn't graph.
That's why it's not.
It's got a TI-36X Pro.
No, it's got to be at least an 80. It's got to be a graphing calculator.
It's got to be one of the 80 series. Because I know the one I had in high school, which was like an 82 or an 84.
I think that's what I had, 82 or 83, something like that.
Yeah, was the same way. It had, this will do everything but graph it. This one's very popular for ham radio, which is why I have this particular one. Because we don't need the graphing calculations, but it does a lot of the other calculations in it.
I'm going to totally change the subject on you here. So, all right. So my aunt fell a little while ago, broke her hip. She's doing okay now, but she's still a little dementia-y, and that's where I want to go with this. So apparently, as you get older, when you come out of anesthesia, you are very dementia-y. Like people forget who they are.
Yeah. I've been under anesthesia before, and people have said I've said weird shit or couldn't remember people.
No, but I'm talking about for like days and sometimes it can take up to a month for someone who's older to kind of fully come back from anesthesia. And so what's interesting is that I love, the world when it presents things to you. This article came out, they're studying the microtubules in the brain. So every cell is connected to every other cell by microtubules, and they referred to these as quantum microtubules. So I don't exactly know what that totally means, but they were looking at the effects of anesthesia on these microtubules, and what they were noticing is that the tubules have a vibration to them, and they sort of move just like everything kind of vibrates, and that when you come out of anesthesia, those microtubules aren't vibrating the same way, and the older you are, the longer they take to get back into sync
back up,
right? And so I thought that was interesting. I was talking about this with my cousin, and I was just like, this would be if the argument that conscious is non-local, that you're actually tuning into some consciousness, this could be a practical explanation for the reason that they come out and they don't know who they are. They're on the wrong channel.
Yeah, it could be just like the radio. The antenna's wrong. You're on the wrong channel. You're receiving the wrong info. Or you simply could be accessing a different version of the multiverse. If you want to talk about different vibrations, because I've heard that theory that everything that happens is at a different vibration or a different frequency, but it's all happening at once. You're just plugging into the other one where it's the Bernstein Bears instead of the Bernstein Bears.
Right.
Or where he said, Luke, I am your father, or, all that other stuff.
Well, and so this is not, I don't think it's quite that big, but it's sort of like this, again, if you're tuning into a thing that allows you to, in the moment when someone tells you a thing and suddenly a memory accesses, it's because in that moment you were able to, do that. If your thing isn't tuned in correctly, then you don't know who you are. You don't have access.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that was like,
It's fascinating.
That is quite interesting how these things start to kind of cross over, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I think that might be a good place to wrap up just all over the place, since we've been all over the place anyway. But yeah, I know we want to get to where we're doing these more regularly again. So
yes, that's the plan. It's to be more consistent this year.